Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Respected listeners, welcome to the Islamic Literary Society. Here, once again, we have an amazing interview with an amazing author. We have with us a very interesting topic, and the scholar we're going to be discussing as well is one that's on everyone's tongue. So we're going to, inshallah, have an amazing discussion. Respected listeners, the Islamic Literary Society is a society that was founded in 2019 with the aim of promoting, fostering, and developing a heightened appreciation of authors and literary works for classical and contemporary scholarship. Now, there are a number of different ways in which we engage with our audience. We've got book clubs, book reviews, as you will see on our website, and we have the most interactive way is these interviews. In these interviews, I get to ask authors questions, direct questions about their books, about their publications, and it is an amazing 45 minutes of Q&A with the author directly. So let us begin by introducing our speaker for the day, inshallah. So let's begin with inshallah, bring you in. All right, so we have with us today Dr. Mustapha Sheikh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, Sheikh Junaid?
Alhamdulillah, I'm very well. I'm very well. Let us go through your profile. So, mashallah, we have with us Dr. Mustapha Sheikh, and he has a degree in Islamic law and theology from Islam in Syria, likewise from Wales as well. And he has a master's in the study of religions from the St. Cross College, Oxford, and a doctorate in theology, again from St. Cross College, Oxford as well. And he's also got a degree, mashallah, in project management from UCL. And he's a member of the Arabic, Islamic, and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Leeds in 2009. And he's also been visiting positions at Bangor University and Aston Business School. Mashallah, I could just keep going. Your CV, mashallah, is extensive. So I'd like to begin by saying, Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so Doctor, before we go into the details, so what do you do currently? What is your work, and what kind of things are you involved in currently?
So at the moment, I've been at the University of Leeds for nearly 12 years. I'm still there. And I'm, as you say, in the Department of Arabic, Islamic, and Middle Eastern Studies. And that's what keeps me busy for the most part. Alhamdulillah, for the last 2.5 years, I've been the head of the department, and I'm enjoying that role, and gives me an opportunity to do more than just teach and research, but also kind of look after the subject area and be kind of involved in its development and that kind of thing. So that's really what keeps me busy these days. Okay. I do also like to do things outside the university, and some of the kinds of projects I'm involved in allow me to do that. But you know, I'm also I've got a big family, 4 children, mashallah. And they keep me very busy, mashallah, and parents as well, who are elderly now. I'm looking after them. So alhamdulillah, life's busy.
Life's busy. So Sheikh, let's start from the top then. People have seen your book. Number one, so right, let's go to the beginning. So the first thing read in your CV was that you were in Syria, right? What made you go to Syria, and what did you study there, and what did you gain from your visits there?
Yeah, so I had a choice. I always knew when I was probably late teens that I wanted to study Arabic, Islamic studies. Parents had, from a very young age, ensured that me and my brothers were, you know, were always studying Islam alongside whatever we were doing at school. Alhamdulillah, they're from that first generation of really engaged Muslim parents.
Good.
And so I think I was sort of, by the time I graduated in 2000 from UCL, you know, I had a couple of possibilities. One was to go somewhere like Medina University, or perhaps Egypt or Syria. So for me, you know, all of them were good options at the time. But Syria, I had a friend who'd already gone there. He'd spent a year there. He told me what the situation is like there, what kind of learning is like there. And it just seemed different.
Mm.
You know, it was going in a direction that not many people that I knew were going in. My good friend was there already, and I just thought, let's try Syria. I heard good things about the Arabic there as well. Also, the Ammiya is easier to understand, I was told, than the Ammi in some other parts of the Arab world. But then, you know, you hear all the stories, that hadith as well about Sham, Ahl al-Sham and Fadail al-Sham. So I thought, let's give it a try. And I tell you, to this day, I don't have any regrets about that. I spent four lovely years in Syria.
Good.
My heart yearns to go back.
MashaAllah, a beautiful place. And as you said, it's spoken about by the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So then, Doctor, when you got back from Syria, you pursued higher education in this country, in the UK. What motivated you to do that? Many people, when they come from abroad, they'll get like a mosque position, or they'll open up an institute or something, but you decided to go into higher education. What was the drive behind that?
Yeah. So when I came back from Syria, I hadn't quite finished I was doing Usul al-Din, al-Fath al-Islami, and it became difficult to study in Syria for Brits, of especially Pakistani heritage, British Pakistanis, British Bengalis, British Indians. For obvious reasons now, the war on terror was well underway.
Right.
There was this massive pressure on governments like the Syrian to basically, you know, do something about all of these Muslims from the West studying in these centers of learning. And so it became unbearable, became very difficult to stay there. I have to be really honest, you know, I and many students like me from the UK were made to feel very, very uncomfortable there. So eventually realizing that it's just untenable. Came back, but alhamdulillah, I was able to find in Wales a Sharia college. You might know it, they have a branch in France as well.
Right.
So European Institute of Human Science.
Yeah.
So I was able to finish my studies there then. I spent 2 years in Wales. While I was at Wales, the teachers there were unlike any teachers I'd studied with anywhere, Syria or elsewhere, in that because they were Al-Azhar trained, many of them, or they'd studied in Iraq or, you know, elsewhere in the Arab world. So they were all dakatira, all of them with PhDs, all of them shuyukh and academics.
Okay.
I was sort of introduced to a more, I would say, academic approach to studying the deen, more than I had experienced, say, in Sham, where we were studying. Yeah, it was a university, Al-Fath al-Islami. I was on a takhassus program, which is like a BA, but it was still very, very kind of traditional pedagogical approach. Whereas our professors at this institute in Wales, I think it was because they had a link also with the University of Wales, and their program was validated by the University of Wales. It was modeled much more like a university, BA university program in the UK. And so I think it was really under their influence that I was inspired to kind of pursue studies at master's level, and then with a view to doing a PhD. They had PhDs. And, you know, I thought I wanted to be like that. I also wanted to produce kind of a piece of independent scholarship that pulls together all of the things I'd been studying for all of those years. You know, it was time. It was time for me to actually produce knowledge, not just be a kind of passive recipient of it. Reading the matun is wonderful, and for many, many different reasons, but it comes a point where it's about, okay, what do I do with that information? And it's about producing something of my own now. And I think I realized that a PhD would be the way to do that.
Okay, mashallah. So would you say it's a change of mindset then, like studying the traditional way, like being in Egypt or being in Syria, and then coming to the Western side? Is it you have to think differently, analyze differently? Did it help you in grasping these aspects?
At the time, I was a little worried actually, because I thought, I didn't really want to think differently about learning and knowledge. I was very precious about the way that my teachers had taught me their pedagogical approach.
Yeah.
And so I was quite nervous about it. But alhamdulillah, one of the reasons I wanted to do a PhD was to study Sheikh al-Islam. And that led me to Professor Yahya Michaud at the University of Oxford, who dedicated his career to the study of Sheikh al-Islam. He was a Belgian convert to Islam.
Wow.
And so that when I met him and said, look, I told him about my plans, and he received me very well and said that he'd be happy to take me as his student. He'd seen the studies I'd done in Syria and elsewhere, and he was impressed. And he said, yeah, I'll take you as my student. He said, you've got a very good, strong traditional training. He said, but now you need to learn the way of Orientalism. And I said, okay.
Right, okay, yeah.
So, then he said, yeah, because, this is the way that, that scholarship, is done at the university, a place like Oxford especially. But it was under his supervision, under his guidance, and he's a believer. He's one of the strongest believers I've met. And so, at the same time, it was very much, he taught me how to preserve and maintain my Muslim identity in my scholarship within an Orientalist institution.
Okay.
And I think that I hope that I have preserved that approach to my scholarship since then, right up until now. So you should, when you read my work, you should find a strong Muslim voice in my work and in my scholarship.
Am I fair to say then, if somebody went into Islamic studies, like you said, and had the mindset of, in the Orientalist mindset, and they weren't strong in their deen, there's a potential they could slip?
Yeah, I mean, look, what is Orientalism? There's many different ways of, I suppose, describing it. But one of them is basically to, you write as though you are a white European male.
Right.
Right? Because that's what most Orientalists are, isn't it?
Yeah.
White European males, middle-aged, middle to 80 years old, dinosaurs basically.
Okay.
And what you're doing when you learn to write like an Orientalist is to write like one of them. So when you read someone's scholarship, if that's how it comes across, there's someone who's mastered Orientalism. That's at one level, right? That's at one level. Obviously, at the other level, which is the level that Edward Said talked about in Orientalism, the far more sinister construction of Islam and Muslims, in opposition to the West as backward, primitive, requiring civilizing and all of those other things. That's the nefarious level. And it's very sad to see, of course, when Muslims buy into that kind of ideology. I'd like to think few would kind of do that kind of Orientalism, but it's much easier to see, and much more likely to come across Muslims who feel like they have to work within the framework and the register of Orientalism. And for me, like my teacher, Professor Yahya Michaud, and my colleagues who I work with within academia, I mean, that's just not our way.
Okay. Good. Alhamdulillah. All right. So moving on then, looking at, I'm sure you've got a number of publications, and the book we're going to be looking at as well, a Treasury of Ibn Taymiyyah. So a quick question, and how do you actually come up with ideas of what is it that you want to write, or how do you choose the book that you want to discuss? So what's your thought process in choosing the subjects and titles?
Yeah, so I usually write on things that interest me, that I think are important to me. And because, writing is a long, arduous process, and you have to research before you write. You have to know very well what you're going to write about. And so if you're already connected with it in some kind of deep and meaningful way, that's important. And so most of my writing, academic papers, they're things that I'm interested in. My PhD, which became a book, I was deeply interested in Shaykh al-Islam's writing and teaching and his thought, and how it traveled in different places through the Muslim world through the centuries. But with this particular book, A Treasury of Ibn Taymiyyah, I was commissioned to do this. So Cube, my publisher, they approached me and said, look, we know the work that you've done in Ibn Taymiyyah and we're impressed by it. Would you be willing to contribute to a collection, a series that we have called the Treasury series, which will showcase particular scholars from the classical Islamic heritage? Would you contribute one on Ibn Taymiyyah? So I was naturally honored by that approach, and didn't take me long to accept it.
Okay, very good. Can I just ask, I'm really intrigued in your fascination or your interest in Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah. You seem you're very interested in his life, and so what inspired you to really go into depth in the life of Sheikh al-Islam?
You know better than me, Sheikh Junaid, that Sheikh al-Islam's, he has a presence, whether we like it or not, whether you like him or hate him, he has made an indelible mark on Islam, on Islamic thought. He has a presence there you cannot avoid. And so that's one thing. But also within activist movements, and I grew up within sort of the activist network of Muslims.
Yeah.
Shaykh al-Islam is extremely important. So whether with young Muslims, for example, or similar kinds of groups, you will come across Shaykh al-Islam from a young age.
Yeah.
And I quickly learned, like many people, that Shaykh al-Islam and his thought is liberatory, it's emancipatory, that he was a liberation theologian.
Yeah.
And so that's my first attachment to Shaykh al-Islam, I would say.
Yeah.
Someone who speaks truth against falsehood and oppression, for example.
Yeah.
And, someone who advocated for, status quo when it's oppressive and unjust. And so that was my love affair with him began for those reasons. But then when I went to Sham, I realized actually how there was an erasure. Ibn Taymiyyah is just not there in the intellectual landscape. You can't find his books there. Basically, he's banned. Shaykh al-Islam's work are banned there. You have to get them under the counter. That's what you do. You go into the bookshop and you ask the bookseller, and he slips you a copy. And that's what we had to do. Yet Shaykh al-Islam is buried in Dimashq, Maqbarat al-Sufiya. So that was disturbing for me. Someone who I loved, I thought, I can't study him here, I can't buy his books here. And that was it then. For me, it was why? Why has he been so maligned, and why has he been deemed so dangerous that he needs to be banned? And then I read even more about him and decided there's a lot here that needs to be done. One of the accusations of the ulama in Sham against Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam, of course, is that he was an anthropomorphist.
Right.
And their criticisms of al-Aqidah al-Wasitiyya, etc. And I read al-Aqidah al-Wasitiyya and I saw nothing wrong with it. In fact, I thought, if you have a problem with this Aqidah, you have a problem with the Quran.
Right.
Because so much of it is just straight ayat from the Quran. How can anyone have a problem with this? So for me, I wanted to understand that. How has this come about? And so when I discovered, as I say, my supervisor, Professor Yahya Misho, and his work, which is in many ways, he does explain this kind of the context, the historical context that leads to Shaykh al-Islam's marginalization. I thought, it's time for me to do some khidmah for this Sheikh. And so that's what I see partly my work doing, or I hope that it does.
Yes, well, it's very interesting. I absolutely agree with you. And he's an inspirational person, and it's really, really inspiring when you find a scholar who not just has the intellectual capabilities of debating and discussing with anybody and presenting Islam, but also has the social political skills of how to gear people from a situation to a better situation, how to al-amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, enjoin the good, forbid the evil, but not just on a level it's written in a book, but actually lived it. And especially with his experience, I think with the Tatars, that's also very relevant to a lot of the world events today. Yeah,
I would agree with you completely.
yeah, it's fun. All right, so let's. That was a good discussion about Sheikh Taymiyyah. Look into your book, The Treasury of Ibn Taymiyyah. You have, I think, 34 different chapters or 34 different wisdoms. Could I ask you to just give us a summary of the book? I mean, it's a collection of statements, is it? What exactly is the book about?
Yeah, so the concept of this book, like the others that are in the Treasury series, is that each book presents kind of maxims or aphorisms from a particular scholar, pithy statements that capture their thought and that, just kind of are ideal for reflecting on and connecting with and helping us to think through some of the bigger questions in life that face us. So my job was to go through Shaykh al-Islam's corpus and pick out, a number of statements of his that would work like aphorisms. So that was my first task, really, and I chose ones that connected with me over the years as I was reading Shaykh al-Islam, things that stood out to me. I focused primarily on collecting those, and then I've written commentaries on those and tried to find ways of making those things meaningful in kind of our lives, as Muslims living today. So it doesn't move necessarily logically, although I tried to kind of ensure that there is some coherence to, from one chapter to the next. There may be a kind of a jump from one to the next, but the hope is that they provide you with wisdoms that you can relate to in different aspects of your life.
Okay, good. Okay. And also, out of those, your very first principle, you mentioned Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah's understanding of the science of naming things. In that, there's a discussion of how we should label ourselves as, be it Sunni or be it, different terminology. And Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah argues that we should just call ourselves by Muslims, a universal name. What's the wisdom behind that?
Okay, so yeah. So the statement that I take from Shaykh al-Islam for that, I'll read it to you in Arabic. فَلَا نَعْدُلُ عَنِ الْأَسْمَاءِ الَّتِي سَمَّانَ اللَّهُ بِهَا إِلَى أَسْمَاءٍ أَحْدَثَهَا قَوْمٌ وَسَمَّوْهَا هُمْ وَآبَاؤُهُمْ مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ بِهَا مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ. Let us not turn ourselves away from the names with which Allah has named us for the names that some people have invented, that they have given, they and their fathers, and for which Allah never sent down any enabling authority.
Right.
So that was the statement. So, he recognizes that obviously there are names that Allah gives us. Muslim is one of them, but there are others as well. Mu'min, for example, Muhsin. Okay. There could be, a number of names. What Shaykh al-Islam does here, though, it says that the names that Allah has given us are only good, whereas the names that people invent, because they come and emanate from human beings who are fallible creatures, they can have both positive and negative connotations and force even. So I reflected on this statement, and it really got me thinking about the power of names. And many of us will know that names, we name our children very carefully, don't we? Because we know that they will grow into those names, right, and they will embody those names. So we name our children Muhammad, Ahmad, Aisha, Khadija, etc. So we have that. It's intuitive, isn't it? And it's kind of, there's an intuitive aspect to this, which is we know names have this force. But I think I took it to another level, really, which is to say that, you know, names are very, very powerful in that, especially categories, names which are actually categorizations of humans, of people. Let me give you one example of a very contemporary example, and I'll connect it to one particular structure of oppression that we all live in today. And that's racism, okay? Structural racism, systemic racism. It's predicated on names, right? That are based on color.
Sure.
Black, white,
sure.
Brown, okay? You and I know that those names are not just colors, but they have a real force. Societies, even the globe, are structured around those, whereby white or whiteness is considered the superior, and anybody who is racialized as white, you know, acquires a certain number of benefits or privileges, and has certain access to things and opportunities, and then those who are not don't. All right, and depending on where they are in the hierarchy, they will have less or more. So that would be an example of an invention of names. Okay, and I go further that some names and categories that are invented are so powerful and so degrading that they are actually tantamount to competing with Allah Azza wa Jal.
Okay.
Especially names that underpin a structure of power, an oppressive structure of power, if you see what I mean, especially in the context of something like, you know, racial structure. So this is how I interpreted this particular aphorism or statement.
Okay.
And then at the same time, we do name ourselves in different ways. Self-appellations, and it's natural and innate for human beings to do that. We shouldn't, you know, be prejudiced against people for names that they have chosen for themselves, which they choose to self-identify themselves with, whether they are choosing to identify themselves by their legal school, Hanafi, or Shafi'i, or Maliki, okay, or other kind of appellations, Sunni, for example. Sufi, if somebody wants to call themselves that, or Salafi, if someone wants to call themselves traditionalist, modernist, or neo-traditionalist. Whatever the name, there shall be no friendship on account of these names, nor hostility on the basis thereof. The most noble of creatures in the sight of Allah is, of course, the one who's most fearful of him. So that's the way you know, I see names and their power, and how I've tried to, you know, kind of relate that to Sheikh al-Islam's statement there. Okay,
it's very interesting. It's a more kind of inclusive approach, right, than a divisive one where people, like you said, they use names to promote their own groups or sects and so on and so forth, whereas you're saying we don't give value to the name, but we give value to the principle. Call yourself whatever you like. Yeah. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Okay. So the following question then, looking into your book, the topic of love, right? Topic of love. So Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he talks about love. What's his understanding about love and loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially as, you know, mentioned in Syria, there are various you know, types of understanding of deen. How does he explain love?
So he explains love like he explains sifatullah.
Okay.
All right. Sheikh Junaid, I'm sure you know as well as I do that one of the reasons why many of the mutakallimun take issue with Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah is his understanding of the attributes.
Yeah.
What was it that he is most well known for? Is for affirming the reality of the attributes, right? Haqiqatuha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, lillahi yad haqiqatan, lillahi ayn haqiqatan, etc. So that term haqiqa, the reality of the attribute, he applies to love. That mahabbatullah lil abd, mahabba haqiqiyah. Why would he say that? why would he say that the love of Allah for his servant is a real love? Clearly, there are those who are saying that it isn't real.
Okay.
Yeah? Just
Yes.
like there were those who were saying the attributes of Allah are not real. Okay. For example, al-Mu'attila, especially. Yeah. So for him, there were those mutakallimun theologians who did not believe that Allah can actually love his creation, because that would be tantamount to being in need. When you love your wife, your husband, your children, there's a neediness, you might argue, or someone might argue, in that love, because when they're not there, you feel their absence, correct?
Right, okay.
So some of the mutakallimun were against this idea of taking the idea or concept of love in relation to Allah as real love. All right, so they would basically do ta'wil of it, interpret it away in one way or another. We don't need to go into the details of that.
Sure.
Against that, Shaykh al-Islam says, if Allah says, yuhibbuhum wa yuhibbuna, as he says in the Quran, that he loves them and his servants love him, he says, هذه المحبة حق, this mahabba is truth, is truthful. It's a reality. كما نطق بها الكتاب والسنة, just as it has been articulated in the Quran and the Sunnah. And for me, I think what it is really a recovery or a preservation for the everyday Muslim reading the Quran, who when he reads or she reads that verse feels a real connection. Wow, Allah loves me as much as I love Allah. It's preserving that kind of that connection against any attempts, philosophical, theological, which are seeking to interpret away because of some kind of bizarre theological principle that they're trying to protect. And that's, for me, that was one of the real distinguishing features of Shaykh al-Islam's project, of his work, was to protect the deen for the everyday Muslim against pressures and forces that wanted to over-intellectualize the deen for some other kind of purpose.
Yeah, subhanAllah. I mean, it's almost like when you're talking about the love of Allah, it's almost like it's a love fitri. It's from the innate nature of man to love Allah, and then you feeling loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then to convince them of any other kind of interpretation is almost like going against your fitra, right? You've got to really tackle it to see what exactly do they mean by this interpretation of love.
I mean, what's left? There's nothing left for the Muslim. If you are told that the love that Allah has, that he talks about in the Quran, isn't real love, where does that leave us?
Yeah.
You know, it's just, and, Shaykh al-Islam equally talks about wilaya, that who is the waliullah? Okay, it's not some station that only an elite can reach. It's a station for everyday believers. Every mu'min is, everyday, the everyday believer is a waliullah. And so these are the things sort of claiming these ideas and concepts so that, Muslims feel a connection with the deen, feel a connection with their creator.
Absolutely. So I want to get your thoughts on one of the most famous statements of Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah. Let me read it out and then get your thoughts on it as well. So he says, "What can my enemies do to me? My paradise is in my heart. It is with me wherever I go. To imprison me is to provide me with seclusion. To send me into exile is to send me away in the path of Allah. And to kill me is to make me a martyr." And this is a very famous statement. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And in the current climate that we're living in, unfortunately, many of our ulama, scholars across the world, are in prison. So could this statement serve to motivate them and encourage them and guide them in the right direction?
Yeah, so this is actually chapter 10 of the Treasury book that I have written. Okay, so in the Arabic, Shaykh al-Islam says, "Ma yaf'alu a'da'i bi." What can my enemies do to me? Inna jannati wa bustani fi sadri. Paradise is in my heart. Okay, wherever I go, it's with me. Inna qatli shahada. Okay, if my execution is martyrdom. okay, sijni khalwa, okay, and my imprisonment is a form of spiritual retreat. It's like i'tikaf, okay, wa nafyi siyaha, and if they exile me from my land, it's like a hijrah. So what is this? I mean, this statement for me is, in this day and age, leave aside somebody, our shuyukh, of course, Allah yahfadhum wa, Allah release them from their various states, their imprisonment, etc. Those scholars who stand up for truth and who have been imprisoned unjustly. Of course, there should be, in statements like this of Shaykh al-Islam, absolutely these should be sources of support for people in such situations, and hope, and drawing inspiration. But for the everyday believer, I think there's such wisdom in this, because we are under a lot of pressure, especially in these times. Let's talk about COVID times. The kind of pressure and stresses in our lives are many. We feel our jobs are endangered. Many people have lost their jobs in this time. Our health is endangered. It feels like we're constantly in danger of ill health, of the worst kind. There's a pandemic, and we're frightened. We don't know just how harmful this disease that's circulating is. And there's a tendency, or it's common now for people to be pendulum swinging between relaxation and real fright, happiness and sadness.
Yeah.
This pendulum swinging is not good for us. It's not good for our mind. It's not good for our bodies. It's not good for our souls. And that's obviously why there's a lot of emphasis and interest in mindfulness today. For me, a statement like this shows, I mean, he was actualized and realized, Shaykh al-Islam. Anything he was thrown, whatever situation he was in, he was a pillar, like a strong tree in the wind, flexible enough to deal with that situation. That's for me the lesson in these words.
Yeah.
So
He
the contemporary relevance for me is just striking there.
Yeah, he's able to pull out something positive in every situation.
We can really do with that in this day and age, right? In the times we're in right now. It's very difficult to see much positive in what we're going through, but Amrul Mu'min khayrun kulluh. That's basically the essence, heart of what he's saying is really that hadith.
Yeah.
That the affair of the Muslim is good, whatever it is.
Yeah. And Doctor, I've got another question for you, interesting one, that Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, like you said, whether you like him or you don't, but you have to discuss him, right? He is a figure that you can't get away from. But you find that a lot of people have claimed Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, from those who are as extremely passive, I would say, to those who may be much more engaged, and some may even call them slightly extreme elements in society. How is it so that two polar opposites can make claim to the same person and come to like completely different outcomes?
Yeah, this is I think this happens when you have a scholar like Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam al-Ghazali. You have these kinds of scholars who are prolific writers who contributed to so many different disciplines, polymaths. Yeah, when you have scholars like this, then they become, subject to various kinds of interpretations and reclamation, or claims, and I think that's kind of it's inevitable in a sense. He wasn't somebody who just wrote a single epistle, volumes and volumes. And so for some, it's a bit like the famous, the parable of the elephant and the blind.
Yeah.
One's holding the trunk, the other the tail, the other the legs of the elephant, and the other the ear. And each one thinks, the one who's holding the ear thinks he's holding a big fan. One who's holding the legs thinks it's a trunk of a tree. It depends on what in the work or the corpus of someone like Shaykh al-Islam, what you choose to focus on. is how you might read him. But I think the best way of approaching a scholar like Shaykh al-Islam is to really to look at the breadth of that scholarship and be careful before imposing upon him a particular kind of ideology or interpretation. So because it's such a rich body of scholarship that he produced, he is kind of prone to these different kinds of impositions. So it's unavoidable, really.
Right.
And it is what it is.
Okay. And Doctor, there's so many people who have, done doctorates and research into the life of Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, like yourself and your teacher as well, and various others, people who've dedicated their lives to Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah. Let's say, for example, hypothetically speaking, if I was to engage in research into Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, what aspects of his life do you think are still untouched or they deserve more attention?
Yeah, I think his politics is probably an area, his pragmatics. There's the utilitarianism in Shaykh al-Islam. That's something that some have discerned in his thought, in his work. So those are some areas that probably could be explored. But he has written volumes. His understanding of tasawwuf and suluk. I've done a little bit of work on that. I think a lot more work could be done, especially as Sufism is obviously very, very popular, and he's often categorized as anti-Sufi, and he wasn't. He was anti-mutasawwifa, the fake Sufis. Okay, that's who he was opposed to, and suluk, when it leads to harm of various kinds. So I think there's still a lot of work. We've probably just sort of scraped the surface, or just the tip of the iceberg, but I think there's a lot that could be done. Just as there's a lot that could be done with other great and prolific scholars.
Yeah. Has he got anything on politics? Is he a siyasa sharia? Has he got any? Yeah,
that's siyasa sharia would be a very good one to look at, and it's traveling, how it travels through a later Islamic history. It was picked up by the one of the groups that I studied for my PhD, the Qadizadalis in Ottoman Turkey in the 17th century. They translated the Siyasa Sharia, and it was important to them and their activism. So, there's a lot, every generation anyway, can find relevance and relate Shaykh al-Islam's works to them. And as long as that's an ongoing process, it never ends. There's, scholarship on these great personalities and on the works of these people it should be an ongoing thing. There should never be closure there.
Okay. Right, Doctor, we're coming to the latter part of our discussion now. Alhamdulillah, you've been answering a lot of my questions. I need to give you a bit of a break soon. So, question now, some general questions. Why are literary activities so important to understanding our past, present, and our future?
So there are many, many good reasons, but I think identity probably today is one of the most important. Who are we? Right now, everybody, apart from ourselves, is defining who we are.
Right.
And in so many ways, our Islam, our Muslimness is no longer something that we are in control of or have agency over. The good Muslim versus bad Muslim kind of dichotomy or binary that's imposed on us, who is the good Muslim, the moderate Muslim, and so on and so forth. So there's this big identity crisis that we face. Again, I would connect that most recently to the war on terror, and the ways that has led to the regulation and control and the discipline of Muslims. So for us then, engagement with our past, literary past and present as well, is really, really important for identity formation, for a sense of self, for a sense of self-worth, self-esteem, but also to broaden our horizons, to imagine ourselves in the future, requires us to understand who we are now, and the past is part of that. Otherwise we have a limited horizon. We will struggle to imagine ourselves in a situation other than the one that we are in now. And I think most of us, Sheikh Junaid, I'm sure you would agree, we are not in a very good situation right now. And, you know, so to be able to expand our imaginations and imagine a different future for ourselves, I think that literature and our scholarship and classical tradition can do a lot there.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. And what advice would you give as well then to the percentage or the proportion of us that are not good readers, or we don't really read? So how important is it that words coming from you now as a professor, you're speaking to the audience now, you're speaking to our youngsters and those that read, what words can you give them to motivate them to start picking up books and start reading?
All right, so this is a difficult question, actually. I don't think I'm the best reader, I have to say. Right. So I'm not an orthodox reader. I don't always read a book from beginning to end. Okay. In fact, often I might pick up a book and after 10 pages, I go, I know where this is going. And I decide I know the rest of the book and I'll put it down and I'll tell you about that book. Yeah. Usually that's novels, right? And I'm like that with movies as well. I might watch a movie 15 minutes. Probably because I've seen so many movies, you just know where it's going to go. Right. So then, whereas someone else, you know, a proper reader will read something from beginning to end, even if it's a predictable storyline. And that doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So what I'm trying to say is there are different readers, and you shouldn't think to yourself, I have to be this kind of reader. You know, read in a way that works for you. Okay. For you, it may be scan reading. It may be reading some chapters, but then other chapters just kind of scanning over them, because maybe you know that, maybe you've read that before and you know that information there. Or it may just be go straight to, if there's a book that you're interested in, just go to the chapter that interests you. If it's you know, a book like this, let's say this Treasury that I've written, maybe not every chapter heading is of interest, but there may be something in there that is. You just go straight to that. Yeah. And you know, there are different ways of reading, but I think all of us are readers. There's no doubt. I mean, reading is a primary way or mechanism or medium for learning, and of course, you know, we're all readers. But it's just about not being too, you know, don't beat yourself up about it. If you're not reading in the way other people are reading, if you're not going through books, you know, a book a week or something, you know, there are different ways. But of course it's important. And inshallah, everybody finds their own way. Right, okay. Sheikh, some words from yourself, if you could, some supporting words in our project here, the Islamic Literary Society. What do you think of this idea, and words of support and encouragement for others to jump aboard and to see the relevance and importance of what we're doing? Oh, it's very, very important. What you're doing, Sheikh Junaid, what our brother Abdul Hayy is doing as well, who's writing the book reviews that are going on to the website. Some of the other kinds of activities now, like the reading group, which will be online, where there'll be a book each month, and you know, an opportunity for people, for people in our community to come together to discuss books, which will hopefully inspire reading, which is what you asked me just now. Yep. I think these are all very, very valuable pursuits and endeavors, and I'm glad to see that that you are doing this. It's important that we support you in your endeavor. And but also it's good for authors, it's good for us that you platform us and connect us with the community, especially myself at a university. I look forward to opportunities where I can connect with the Muslim community. So giving us these opportunities are appreciated. So I hope, inshallah, our listeners and people who are tuning into this recognize the value of what the Islamic Literary Society is doing and support it in its endeavors. Excellent. My last question to you, and then we will conclude, but don't go. My question is, what are we expecting from yourself? Any further publications? What are we expecting from you? Okay, so more recently, in the last couple of years, I've been working on the Hanafi madhab. It's one of my other great loves, apart from working on Shaykh al-Islam. And so you can look out for some more scholarship on the Hanafi school of thought from me, inshallah. Okay, fantastic. Excellent. Okay, so stay with us, Sheikh. Don't go anywhere. Respected listeners, if I can just share with you
Okay, share with you our website, the Islamic Literary Society. Don't forget, we've got an amazing launch of Dr. Usman Latif's new book, Navigating War, Dissent and Empathy in the Arab-US Relations. That will be coming out soon, so do stay tuned for that. Stay alert for the details of that. We're going to have a massive book launch, hopefully. Furthermore, as the doctor said as well, we do have book reviews. You can go down any topic that is appealing to you, just to have a look through. You'll see a whole lot of books. For example, you've got a few books here. You just click on the book and you'll have a review there from various people and their thoughts on what they're reading. Videos, so an interview like this, you'll find this under this section. Strongly recommend you to go through our videos. So these are, these are the audio videos. Okay, there we go. Right. So that's that. And then you got news and events, finding a reading club. We're also launching a reading club once a month. We'll get together, or maybe once every 2 weeks. We'll be coming together to discuss a particular book. And it's really important that we do that. Number one, it will encourage us to read. Number two, it gives a platform to share ideas. So, you know, you can express your views and your thoughts and listen to what other people have to say. So you don't want to miss out on that, right? Finally, membership, right? So you can become an exclusive member to the society where you'll get some insight, you get some exclusive material. You'll only get to know what that is once you sign up. So join that, inshallah. So yeah, help us to help yourselves and help our learned people in society to, you know, put their work on the front line. So on that note, first and foremost, Dr. Mustapha, Sheikh, I'd like to thank you very, very much for giving us your time. I've given you lots of questions and you, mashallah, you were right there answering all of them. So jazakallah khair.
Barakallahu feekum. Thank you for having me. It's been a great honor. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you and the Islamic Literary Society.
Okay, jazakallah Sheikh. Don't go away. And respected listeners, final few words. We're going to wrap things up here. We will see you hopefully in another interview. We also have starting on the 30th of January 2022 from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. we will be launching a reading club. Okay, so do join us on that. The book that we're going to be reading is I Refuse to Condemn, which is a collection of articles Brother Asim Qureshi has put together. So we'll be going through that book. So do join us on that. The book review as well, as the book launch, sorry, the one we were discussing is going to be on Sunday, the 16th of Jan, 2022, 6 p.m. to 7:20 p.m. So do join us on that as well. So respected listeners, thank you very much for your time. We will see you next time with another book, with another discussion with an amazing author. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.